And we're live.
Excellent. I've got to remember to have my smiley face rather than my frowning at computer tech face. Like, what's going on with the tech?
Some kind of mime clown face. You're sad until we go live, and then you're happy.
got to remember to be inviting to people. Yeah. So all those
Oh
people
man,
that tune in live, we got to give them something worthwhile tuning in for. A happy
no
face better than
doubt.
a happy.
Yeah, how
So
are you,
how
man?
I'm good. Yeah, London is actually sunny. Contrary to popular opinion, it doesn't rain here all the time. I mean, it rains a lot in Britain as a whole, but
Yeah,
the east and west, as small as the place is, are very, very different. So yeah, it's been quite sunny for a while. So it's all good. How about you? How are you enjoying California?
broadcasting from our new world headquarters in the
Excellent.
lovely Yuba City, California.
Yuba
The
City.
small town America vibe, and this is our new office, so it's looking good.
Yeah.
Quick tour for those who care. It used to be a cake shop, and now we're turning it into all things e-commerce, and so we're real excited about it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's fun stuff.
excellent.
So
So
yeah,
you're fresh from your travels, not just down from the sort of wet wilds of Seattle, but also you've been in Zambia. So
yeah.
that's the topic that sort of gives us the topic for today, for everyone who's listening or watching. So we're going to be talking about charity and integrating that with business, which is a really interesting topic. Not heard it very often talked about. So and obviously,
Hmm.
Jason's the man for that. So if you are watching and listening, do put any thoughts or comments in, and we'll try and weave them in as ever if you know if it fits. But obviously around the topic, please. Not should I start retail arbitrage? That's not what we're dealing with today. Integrating charity and business is what we're focused on today. So relevant questions welcomed, or comments indeed.
Sure.
So with that said, are we ready, do you think, to go into recording our podcast in our
Let's
usual
do this,
fashion?
buddy. Let's do it. Yeah,
Let's do it. Okay. Have you hit record? The
we're
basic
live.
question. We're live.
Yes, we're
Excellent.
going.
All good. Here we go then. Right then. Today's topic is a how-to guide for integrating charity and business. We're going to discuss Jason's organization in Zambia that currently employs over 100 team members who assist over 20,000 children a year with food, school uniforms, and other purposeful products. Plus, we'll lay out the simple steps that anyone can follow to integrate charitable business giving, I should say, charitable giving into your business. So, Jason, fascinating topic. I'm really, been daring, wanting to ask you all about your trip anyway. So, what were you doing there in the first place?
Yeah, we had a great time. I was hosting a group from an organization called Convoy of Hope. They are a large organization in the Midwest, and they've kicked off a feeding program with us. We're feeding 4,850 kids daily hot lunches in 10 schools in a place called Nombe Compound, which is a very challenging slum, you could call it, in Lusaka, Zambia. And we've been working there since 2009, and this is sort of our latest project that we've launched, and we're really excited about it. So their chief operating officer was on the trip, their international program senior vice president, and then their director for Africa program work. Were all on the trip, and we got to host them, show them our work, and cut ribbons in front of these kitchens that were built in these little schools, these really challenging schools, and meet the principals there and the community, and it was just a great time. So yeah, we had a good time. So they were there for several days, and we saw our other program work as well, our backyard gardens program, our Through Esther's Farm program, and then they left, and then I did several days of program training and workshop type stuff with our teams there.
Wow, so extraordinary stuff. I mean, so I guess the first question is, for those who don't know you that well, they know you as an e-commerce operator. Maybe they think of you as the doll closed guy, if they,
Mm, yeah,
depending what hook people have got for you in their mind. But
yeah,
I know obviously you've got a big background in charity. But what took you there in the first place as an e-commerce operator? What are you doing in the middle of Zambia, giving people meals?
yeah, yeah. Well, we started our work there in 2009. I was leading a trip. I worked for in charity for 20 years professionally. I was leading a trip to Zambia to look at HIV/AIDS program implementation work with was a big push back in the 2000s, and I we went on a day excursion to a local school there in this place called Nombe Compound, and I met a group of 8 moms. They were trying to make beaded costume jewelry to raise money for a school that they hoped to build for their kids. They had 475 children that they just collected off the streets, including their own kids too, though. from their community, and they had a community school, and they really wanted a school building. They were meeting in a partially built church, and I just when I met them, had this incredibly strong conviction that I needed to help them. I didn't know how to help them. I didn't know what they needed. I didn't know them. I didn't know their community. I didn't know anything about the context. At that point, I had been in nonprofit management for 15 years or more. Had a graduate degree in international nonprofit management. So it was the career path that I was living on and part of and walking. And but this was a special group, and it really altered the course of our life, you know. And we've worked with them since 2009.
Wow, amazing. But I guess that there is a sort of thread of your life that's been there, consistently as part of your professional
Yeah,
training and experience for a long, long time.
yeah.
So, yeah, I guess the next thing is the obvious question is, okay, so on the one hand, there's you with all of that background, and then there's you, the e-commerce operator. But how do the
Mhm.
two, do they just kind of exist side by side? Do they have anything to do with each other? How does that work?
Sure, yeah, yeah. Well, we think they're pretty integrated, at least in our hearts and lives, they're integrated. I don't know from the customer perspective how good we're doing integrating it all, but we take our whack at it. The reality was we were nonprofit people who couldn't pay the bills. You know, we were like many nonprofit people. We had a heart to serve, a heart to do missional work and caring type service. But the reality of living on the West Coast is it's just expensive. And so that was the tension. So we started selling on eBay in 2007. It was, my wife's sort of, part-time, what she could do. We have 3 kids, so they were in school. So it was sort of a part-time side hustle deal that she could weave to her life, really more than mine. And then it turned into e-commerce operation and a real business, a real company. Ultimately, I retired from my 9 to 5 job on January 1st, 2014 and went full time with the business. So what we do now is we consider it a parallel structure where we have a 501c3 charity that we run as volunteers. It's we don't take any salary or anything like that. In fact, we're insanely frugal. We try to have zero overhead. But then we have our e-commerce operation that funds our life, and we like to dine out, and we like have a car and a house, and we don't haven't taken a vow of poverty. So we live in this weird space between on the one hand trying to do well for the community we're serving and the people we're working to support, and also live in the real world and have our own needs met and that kind of thing. And so there's a tension there constantly. Now, as it happens on the business side and the charity side, all of this is pretty much in the sewing space. So we ended up having an integration there thematically, where we have Pixie Fair is our e-commerce operation. If you're not familiar with it, you can check it out, pixiefaire.com. It's a marketplace of about 3,500 digitally downloadable patterns, sewing patterns, and then video training and a membership course, like Sewing with Cinnamon is what it's called. And then we have our charity called So Powerful, and that's got its own trajectory and its own life, but we try our best to integrate them all and bring people into the charitable work from our e-commerce operation. We don't really push the other way. We don't try to bring people into our e-commerce operation from the charity. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and it kind of would seem weird and wrong anyway. But so we do our best to use our business to have an on ramp for people learning about the charity. Yeah.
Nice. I mean, so a lot of people listening, and that would include me, have a wish to, be more, what's the word, helpful to other people, or maybe in
Yeah.
many cases a much stronger calling, as you kind of experienced, almost visceral kind of calling experience. And I'm sure that's not
Yeah.
not unique, but it's not easy to actually do this stuff, is it? So what suggestions do you have for people who are really interested in making a difference but don't know where to get started?
I think the main thing is, um, I mean, not to boil it down to just platitudes, but like, I think it's true that in life there really are sort of people who are givers and people who are takers. And the people who are givers have art to give. And so the ones who aren't that, then they won't ever really, they might flirt with the idea of doing something charitable, but it's really about their ego or about status or positioning. There's some kind of kernel of personal you know, self-interest there. But for the ones who just say, man, I'm just brokenhearted by, you know, whatever it is, orphan kids or the planet being, you know, the rainforest being destroyed, or like whatever topic it is, you know, just like just some topic that captures your heart and imagination and energy. I think that's the place to start, is asking yourself the question, what are you really passionate about? So passionate that you would give up your time and give up your talent, give up your treasure, that you'd pour your heart and soul into something if you could make a difference in that regard. And I think that's the place to start, is really going back to sort of your own reflections in your life. What's really, really stood out to you? What things have you said, no, this just is, I just can't stand. This isn't right. This can't, in a world of, you know, modern world, this can't be happening. What's like, why in the world is there something like whatever it is you're thinking about allowed to exist? That's where it starts, I think. And getting clear on that, I think, is a great first step. And sometimes that takes journaling or introspection. It takes reflecting back on times when you've really been, you know, ticked off and upset about something, and asking yourself the question, why? You know, what's the underlying motivation there, or issue or concern that's caught your attention, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess for me, it kind of ties in a way with commercial life insofar as that a lot of people go into product areas they don't really care about, and
Mhm.
it's generally a
Yeah.
disaster. So I
Yeah.
think having something that really you care about, and interestingly, of course, that even though it was because you, as you said, the sort of profit, what do you say, non-profit focused people who couldn't pay the bills, but even so, what
Mhm.
you ended up doing was very much driven by an unusual talent that Cinnamon had,
Mhm.
right? If not to say
Yeah.
a passion. So it's not a bad thing for everyone to reflect on anyway, even in purely commercial life. But I guess it
Yeah.
doubly goes for charity, right? Because otherwise, why bother going through it? As you say,
Yeah.
you're either going to care enough to do it, or you're not, as you say.
Yeah.
So, what's some practical steps then? I mean, so sort of as a practical prelude, journaling and introspection sounds
Mhm.
like a good process, but that's not sort of a doing step. What are the sort of next things that we need to do if you're really going to pursue this path?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really valuable step to actually do something that might feel like a little bit of a research project, or you know, Googling around real intensively to figure out, are there people doing something in response to the issue that you care about? And are they doing it in a way that you feel like is a good approach to it? You know, I mean, as soon as you start to go down that path of like what's happening that you're you know, kind of upset by, you're already articulated in your mind something called the theory of change, which is basically your response to the issue. Now, you might have an uninformed theory of change, like you might be completely wrong. You might see something that needs to be changed, and you think that you know how to change it, and actually you make it worse. You know, but what you want to do is do really kind of a graduate level research to say what charities exist that are operating in that space, and what are their core tenets and beliefs. You know, who's behind them, what's their motivation, what how they run operationally. Can you really see the value in their point of view and approach to the work, and can you believe in them? You know, like, are they a professional, appropriate response to the issue? And if you find that organization, if you find a charity that you say, oh man, these guys are just, they know what the issue is, they know how to approach it, they have outcomes that are proven, and I just think they're great people, then you know the answer. Just throw yourself into the mix with them. Find out who they are, how they operate, how you can participate. Now, if you don't find that person or that group or that charity, then you're left with sort of the horns of a dilemma, which is, do you start something yourself? Um, and I didn't start my own charity until I had gotten a graduate degree in international nonprofit management and had worked at a huge organization for 16 years, or yeah, 16 years, and I had volunteered at a lot of smaller charities, so I had a kind of background and point of view on things. But I wouldn't encourage somebody to just start something cold if they've never been involved. Even if there's an organization that you feel like maybe doesn't have the right approach, you might be better off volunteering with them, or working with them for a few years just to understand operationally why they do things the way they do. Maybe you'll come to appreciate their point of view on things, or maybe you'll learn what not to do. And fair enough. So
I mean, very, very interesting and fascinating to hear this, not a topic we've ever really discussed before. What does strike me is, and this isn't very popular approach in e-commerce, but it does strike me as very good advice for anyone in e-commerce or indeed trying to start their own business. It's not a bad idea to have some training and experience in a similar company. I'm not saying it's a given that you have to make a rule for yourself and give yourself, as it were, you have to take a driving test before you drive, but it's not a bad idea. I mean, frankly, a lot of the people that I know that are quite successful have worked in the industry on behalf of somebody else or partnered with somebody else who had perhaps more money and more experience before they then ventured into an area on their own, which is quite a common trait, not amongst the e-commerce operators as a whole that I know, but the successful ones, which is a bit of a hint, isn't it? That the experience and training does count, which somehow there seems to be almost a pride that everyone takes, probably because they're trying to sell courses, in saying, oh, experience doesn't matter.
Start your own thing.
Start your own thing. And I'm not saying that you have to put a rule on yourself, but I do think experience does count. And if you have experience in something, it makes sense to, pursue that area as long as it's something that crosses the Venn diagram of I care about this. And I would say that for me personally, that feels like it makes sense in the business world. Again, possibly more extreme in the charity world, because if you don't care about it, if you don't know about it, I guess if you sell widgets that don't sell, it's disappointing. Whereas if you do a lot of damage to a community somewhere, it's even more important maybe. But yeah, interesting.
I mean, I think that the difference is in the business space, we're always focused on a product or service. The question is, how good a product or service is it? In the charity space, you're really focused on meeting a need or addressing an issue. Again, that phrase "theory of change" is kind of the kernel of the idea. It's like, what is it that you're trying to alleviate or resolve or reform or correct? There's deep water there. You have to actually start to think through this stuff and really, really come to grips with the fundamental approaches. And there's a lot of slapdash, haphazard work that can get done in the charity space that's not effective. And the worst thing, to be honest, is sometimes the people who do really shoddy work in the charity space are really good fundraisers or storytellers. So you've got these two tensions in the charity space. You need to do really, really good work and learn what good work is in your area, but you then also have to figure out how to raise money for it. And, those are two different trade skills.
And again, I guess I'm sort of speaking with the commercial bias, not having had your charity experience, that the shoddy workmanship with great marketing is not uncommon in the commercial space, although over time it gets found out, and I'm sure the same is true in charities, but it can take a while.
The difference is, if it's all right for me to kind of go down that rabbit hole for a minute, the difference is in the charity space, many times people will have a philosophy or an approach that they wholeheartedly believe in, but time proves is incorrect. And they didn't know it. Like with a product, you're like, is this a good garlic press? Well, I can find out in about 3 seconds or whatever. Is it a good mattress? Well, give me 3 or 4 nights to sleep on it. I'll tell you. Is it a good cheeseburger? Well, I'll find out after one eating. But in the charity space, people can have these very, very long life cycles of really not testing, really not understanding, and then ultimately finding out that, oh, this actually is toxic or destructive, or like whatever it is. And that's sort of the difference, is this short, quick response time for products, and it's just a different system of thinking, I guess.
Makes sense. I mean, 2 quick responses on that. One is, occasionally charity gives very quick feedback that what you're doing is wrong. There's a famous story that Charles Dickens, the author, was involved in a train crash in Victorian Britain, and he went around feeding brandy to people, which was seen at the time as a good idea, which turned out to kill a few people from choking, which is not surprising to me. But so that was a very, very obvious misguided attempt. That's rarely that big quick feedback loop. The other one that strikes me, though, is that in between, without going any further down this rabbit hole, but it does turn up in e-commerce, is people advising, giving courses, giving books, doing one-to-one or one-to-many advisory, where again, wrong thinking. They may wholeheartedly be sincere about it, but may take a while to throw out the results in broken businesses. And again, just because somebody wholeheartedly believes something doesn't mean that you should follow it. As you say, there's got to be the proof, and that can be complex sometimes. But
it is interesting. Of course, there are people who teach such things. I've never felt inclined to teach nonprofit issues publicly. I did teach nonprofit management as an adjunct professor at university, but that to me was different. It was just like a classroom setting. It wasn't like trying to market a course or anything like that. I think this is one of those things where the subjects are so unique that we might be passionate about, that really your own education is required in every one of those spaces. If you're really passionate about whatever it is, ecology or human trafficking or orphan issues or malnutrition, those are such radically different topics and disciplines. Really it's more a solo journey of discovery in some ways on finding out more about what area you're convicted or passionate about, and how to respond appropriately. Anyway.
yeah, I guess maybe that's one of the differences between business and charities, that the outcome of business can be lots of different types of products, but the main thing it has in common is profit, hopefully, and cash flow, and possibly building a valuable asset you can sell. Whereas for charity, as you said, the outcomes you're looking for could be very, very different and personal. So one question to come back to then, to bring it back to the more sort of practical questions. You've said, if you find a charity that you think is great, you can get behind it. And I guess that means, you're going to give something to it. So when, what forms of giving can we give? I guess cash is the obvious one, but how does it break down?
Yeah. There's a phrase that a lot of people will use in the charity space that's time, talent, and treasure. I think that's a nice phrase. It kind of comprehends different areas. So time is just volunteerism, and many organizations need volunteers, and so that's obvious. And sometimes can be hard though. In terms of your desire to help. Sometimes organizations don't make it easy. They don't have a lot of good on ramps, for volunteerism. Others do. Others do great jobs with that. So that's time, and then, talent is bringing your skill sets to the party. As e-commerce operators, we know how to do a very special set of skills. I don't know if it's Liam Neeson from some recent movie, but there's a meme and they like do anything, and it's like, I have a very particular skill set or something like that.
I can't remember the movie, but I've seen it. It's
and we do have a very particular skill set, and so it's not a lot of people on the planet who know how to rig up a welcome sequence with email marketing and good stuff like that, or run ads on Facebook. This is a very small group of people who know how to do that relative to the worldwide community of people. And so if there's charity that you are passionate about, and they don't have a good website, or they don't have a good email marketing, they don't have any social media presence or whatever, can you bring your talent to the party and offer to serve, and not with a critique like, hey, let me critique the ways you're not doing something, but that's not helpful. You want to bring your skills to the party and say, hey, I'm happy to actually help you run your email marketing, or can I be on your email marketing team or whatever, stuff like that. So that's talent. And treasure is your money. Now your cash giving is valuable, for sure. There's also lots of other treasures. You have assets that you can bring to the party. And when you start to really work hard for a charity, and you really, either it's your own charity or a charity you really believe in, you really start to think through, how many ways could I help these people? Like if it's you or whatever, but how many things can you do? And actually, as it happens, there are a good number of ways that you can help a charity. This space that we're leasing as our business, but we'll run our charity out of this space. So it's gifted, corporate office. We have staff members who do stuff for our charity that we pay from our business. So they're a de facto volunteer for our charity, but really we're the ones paying for their work on the business side. And there are other things. I mean, there's assets that you want to dispose of, literal things like phones, furnishings, computers, maybe product. There are a lot of fashion retailers. Fashion's a very obvious thing that can be used for charitable purposes. Local homeless shelter always needs clothing, and Bombas has done a really great job taking the buy one give one model to a healthy place. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Michael, but they support homeless shelters.
Yeah.
And so when you buy socks or underwear or whatever from Bombas, another one goes to a homeless shelter, and that's a really elegant buy one give one model. Tom's is a hot mess disaster that we can talk about, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the background of that, but Tom's was a really improperly implemented theory of change, and it's a really interesting story. So anyway, so there are lots of ways you can help charities, and Time, Talent, and Treasure is a pretty good summation.
Nice. Yeah, it's a good little phrase to remember. And
Yeah.
talking of Tom's shoes, then, I mean, we could talk about that as a specialist case study. Happy to hear
Yeah.
your summary of it. But I mean, just more broadly, what are the pitfalls and downsides of entering into this? You've mentioned theory of change, which implies you think you know what the problem is, which you may not,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, and you think you know what the
Mm-hmm.
solution is, which I'm sure may
Yeah.
often be wrong.
Yeah.
So how do we? Yeah, what are the downsides first of all?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're not familiar with the story of Tom Shoes, it was insanely popular buy one, give one model. And Blake Makowski started it and pioneered that concept. It became super trendy. He was super good at earned media in LA. He was connected, and it just blew up as a brand. And on the ground in places like Central America or South America or Africa, the shoes, you'd buy a pair of shoes and then another pair would be given to a child in need, that kind of thing. The problem was implementation, and the distribution of shoes broadly. The question is a distribution of shoes, like on the ground in a place like Nombe Compound where we work, helpful to the local context. I never will forget sitting in the principal's office of a school in Nombe Compound, and the principal being quite agitated that she had gotten boxes and boxes and boxes of Tom shoes. The problem was it was a primary school, so first through sixth grade, seventh grade, whatever, and all the shoes that she got were like large sizes, men's like 9 to 12, women's whatever large size women's shoes are. And none of the sizes were for the kids in her school. And so I asked her what had happened, and as it happened, she was a sub grantee, which is a phrase. So she was a downline beneficiary from another charity, and the charity had obviously creamed the crop of what they wanted. They took the shoe sizes they wanted, and they gave her all the ones that made no logical sense. So then she had all these huge boxes. She still had kids that didn't have adequate shoes. It was just a poorly executed idea. And so, and then besides the fact that, what about the local shoe merchants in that community? It's like, all the shoes have been given away. And so, those are challenging implementation problems. And so Bombas's approach to work directly with homeless shelters seems like a little bit more elegant implementation. And so anyway, that's kind of the idea. The theory of change, it goes directly to what are you doing, and really theory of change. If you want to geek out over it, go read The Goal by Eliyahu Goldrate, who in his famous book, which is about the law of theory of constraints, asks three questions: what do you change, what do you change to, and how do you make the change? And those three questions are perfect precursors to the idea of a nonprofit formulating their theory of change, as they work in a community or with people.
By the way, yeah, I re-listened to this book recently on the back of a conversation with a mastermind member because it occurred to me that it was the answer to the question he was asking me. Now, I haven't gone back to him, talked about it yet because it's quite hard to
Yeah.
grasp in some ways, but it's a fantastic book. I would
Yeah.
totally endorse reading that for everyone in business as well, actually.
Yeah.
So coming back to the mistakes then, Tom Shoe sounds like a crass error on one hand and a more subtle error on the other. So the crass error
Yeah.
is just a distribution problem. You're giving men's shoes to children. That's obviously a bit like Amazon delivering the wrong size shoes. It's a bit kind of silly.
Obvious. Yeah.
But the other thing, the effect on the local shoemaking community is a more subtle one. So that really brings me to the other question, which I guess you've been doing this for like 20, 30 years. I mean, I guess you've seen some big mistakes that people make when they try and interfere into the lives of or intervene, shall we say, / interfere in the lives of people who have what they perceive as a need. So what mistakes have you seen that are the worst ones?
Well, there's a whole body of professional work around the idea of international relief and development and how to do it well. And I think the good work, I'll frame it positively and then mention a few negative components. But the good work is done as really co-creation work with a community. And like when I started in 2009 in Nome Bay Compound with those 8 moms, I didn't know what they needed. I didn't know how to help them. I didn't know how their community worked. I knew they were making beaded necklaces to try to sell, to try to raise money for a school they wanted. So, you can comprehend all that stuff pretty quickly. And so over the course of 6 or 9 months, we worked together, and then we ultimately started making school uniforms. And for 6 years, all they did was made school uniforms. The parents or guardians would make micro installment payments, and the schools were, benefiting by having a uniform school. It's a British, a follow-on colonial system, so they kind of follow in the British form of all having their school uniforms, and so that was important for the school, for school pride and stuff. And so it was co-created. It was a back and forth for 9 months to figure out whether that made sense or not. And I think part of the mistake that can be made with many charitable efforts is a rush to action and a rush to a presumptive decisions and logic that are grounded in the American's mind or the Westerners' mind or point of view. Like, oh, we know what the problem is. There's no water here. Let's drill a well. Okay, that's simple, right? Okay, the well breaks down 9 months later, but you're not there anymore. Then the well is a totem to the Americans who came and went, and the people still go to the streams, to fetch water, and many things like that happen. Africa, in particular, is full of broken wells, bikes that don't work, buildings that are hovels now. Just a lot of failed concepts, and I think a lot of it is because we want to make quick decisions, quick action, and we're not really, sadly, many times invested for the long term in people's lives and in relationships. And so I think that's part of it. We also have an absolute control need as Westerners. They call it the golden rule in charity. He who has the gold makes the rules. And it's just sad. You see a lot of control freaks in implementing charitable efforts, and it's really subjugation of people. And if you're working with a community that's struggling, the last thing they need is some white guy bossing them around from America. Honestly, is like on top of everything else. Now we have the supposed experts from the West who are now telling us things. It's like, really? That's that's what we need on top of the misery and, desperation we're in. And so, you just have to be really thoughtful about what you're doing and not go in blindly to your own self-interest and motivations. And so, there's issues like poor governance, poor organizational structure, bad theories of change we've talked about already, coming in arrogantly, coming in with a know-it-allism that's just distasteful, and wrong.
Yeah.
Not only is it wrong, but it's also distasteful, so, those are hard things to see and observe over time.
I mean, it's again reflecting on, not intended to generalize this. I can reflect on my own experience. I suppose that these sounds like the habits of bad corporate workers as well, needing to be in control. Everyone hates a boss who, makes you stay in late to do, I don't know, create a presentation or something that know is unnecessary, or poor governments, poor organization, arrogance, and I mean that just sounds. In other words, it's just humans being humans, right? Allowing their weaknesses to come through. It's
Well,
interesting that you, yeah, go
yeah,
on.
many parts of the nonprofit operations are business functions. I mean, it is a business venture in many ways. Once you scale from one to one caring and trying to help someone personally to trying to help a community of people or trying to help a group group of people, you're really operationalizing something that's very similar to business. I've lived in both worlds now for a long time, and it's just different thinking sometimes and different terminology, but the underpinnings of much of the work is very similar.
Yeah, which to the point, I suppose, of what we're partly talking about today, which is if you've got if you want to scratch the itch of having your own charitable giving sort of activity, then it sounds like a lot of the skills and some of the mindset, at least, would transfer well from the business world to the
Hmm.
charitable world, with some
Yeah.
areas that really need careful thought and change, really. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's very encouraging to me. I mean, first of all, I admire the fact that you do this. I mean, because you don't have to. There's nothing forcing you to do except your conscience, and I think
Yeah.
that speaks very well of anyone who does that. But also, I know that it's very encouraging to think that it can be done well, because we hear those dark stories, and you've articulated yourself about how it can go wrong. But also, it sounds like you're very respectful and careful about how you've done it. So it's
Yeah.
very encouraging stories that are coming from you. So any final takeaways or words of encouragement to those who are wanting to make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the most vital work of our lives. Cinnamon and I will look back on our charitable work and say it was the mission and purpose of our life. We won't look back on our e-commerce efforts and say that with the same clarity. I mean, we feel like we're funding our charity work with e-commerce, and we want both to go well. But we're really, at the end of the day, convicted that if we don't make a difference in other people's lives, what are we doing? So, I mean, I think that's the thing that I would encourage everybody to think about. Our world is growing increasingly divisive and polarized and ugly. Just, I don't know, man. I don't know how you feel in London, but I, it just sounds weird to me, but things were a lot better in the 80s and 90s than they are now. And I look back and I think to myself, yes, maybe we all have more money and better cars and bigger houses. Maybe, but maybe that's not even true. Maybe that's just true of my family, my context, maybe ish.
Hmm.
But the truth is, I think we all would agree that we need uh, people and as individuals to really contemplate how we can be better in service to people in our communities and do a better job caring. And it seems as if, from my point of view, we become less caring as a culture in the West, at least in the U.S. at least, over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And that's something for all of us to ask ourselves: how do we correct course? You know,
Hmm.
and how do we demonstrate personally, not a virtue signaling, status creating, Facebook version of something I supposedly say I care about, but actually just shut up and do something meaningful and don't even talk about it. Just do it, and do it
Is that
do it.
allowed in the internet world?
I
Are
know,
you allowed to
right?
do something without doing Instagram post? I mean, I'm just as guilty. I was just thinking that last
Yeah,
time if I'd done anything at all for charity, it's because I was running for a half marathon, and that was for my health, and I set myself
yeah,
the challenge. So I'm not pretending to be
yeah,
virtuous, really, but I've got to.
yeah,
If I'm going to raise money for the charity, I've got to talk about it on Facebook, because otherwise, how do I raise awareness of it?
yeah,
So there is an intrinsic
yeah,
kind of virtue signaling kind of component, which I agree is very kind of distasteful. And I always look at it and think, oh God, not another Facebook group for
yeah,
me.
yeah,
Facebook posts, people get enough Facebook posts for me in their feed.
yeah,
Um, and yet, I guess, I do believe in the charities I've supported. I mean,
yeah,
so yeah, it depends, I suppose, why you're doing things. It's not the same behaviors may
yeah,
be motivated by different things, right? And a lot of us,
yeah.
myself included, have to examine the truth of why you're doing stuff.
But you're
Um,
in a very interesting space too, because I know how musical kind of how deep your musical work and professionalism runs, with you and your wife. So you've got to be doing a lot of stuff that is actually for nonprofits or charities
Yeah,
when you do
most of
music
the
stuff,
work I
right?
do,
And
and yeah, I guess that pretty much all the
that
musical
counts.
organizations I've
That's
ever worked for are constituted as non-profits. That's
yeah,
probably true. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think there's something there that's like, I think for a lot of people, this isn't far afield.
Hmm.
We just maybe sometimes don't, or we don't orient ourselves to actually how close to the charitable work we really are, and then just be intentional more about that. I mean, you know, I'll never forget traveling one time. We were going to Ukraine, actually, as it happens, in 1993, and never forget, we stopped in Helsinki, Finland, and
Hmm.
we were over the like 2 nights or overnight, and I walked into this big, it's like a glass dome church, I think, or whatever, but I never forget the music they were rehearsing for the next day's thing. We
Hmm.
sat in that and listened to those people, and to me, that was one of the most striking musical experiences of my life. I don't remember what they were doing because it was not in English, but I'll just never forget how powerful that experience was. And I mean, music changes people's lives in many, many ways, and
Yeah.
there's tons of opportunity to use music as service, and so anyway, so there you go.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, just as my little personal example, I suppose that the most charitable work I do is I'm getting paid as a worker for the charity, but helping choirs of mostly
Hmm.
aging choirs because, the entire
Hmm.
demographics of the world, but particularly of Europe, including UK, is aging. And a
Yeah.
lot of lonely people who come out of the house once a week in order to sing in their local choir. So
Hmm.
I try and make it a good evening for them as their conductor. So yeah, I guess we all have our ways of giving.
Hmm.
And yeah, to your point.
That's really awesome, man. Honestly, that's
It's
really
really
powerful.
impactful. And to your point, I guess there's nothing wrong with having a structure. And it's taken me a few years to allow myself this thought that you articulated so well, which is that I'm allowed to be good at business and to help people with business and to run my own businesses, and also admit that the thing that I will look back on and get is those concerts that I put on for the aging choirs,
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than the e-commerce wins. Just as you
Yeah.
said, that you're going to look back on your charitable work as your main life's work,
Yeah.
which is, it's good to give yourself permission to do that. It feels like a weird sort of dichotomy in the world sometimes, talking
Yeah.
divisions
Yeah.
between
That's right.
that kind of e-commerce traditional pitch, live the good life,
Hmm.
go and spend all your time in Hawaii surfing or whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing, or buying
Yeah.
Teslas. Nothing wrong with that, but that just feels a bit empty. I'm like, okay, that sounds great,
Yeah.
but what am I actually going to try and achieve with my life, with the energy I've got? How am I going to have an impact that I care about? And so
Yeah.
you're really helping to square that circle today. So I think this has been a really, you know, fruitful conversation somehow. I
Yeah.
think it's something that's not talked about enough. It's
Well, I
good
know there are
topic.
a lot of people who listen to the podcast who are people of faith, Christians, and I would just say go read Acts chapter 20, and really the person in the New Testament who pioneered business to run your life and doing different, charitable work or ministry was the Apostle Paul. He was a tent maker. That phrase is from him making tents in the marketplace.
Hmm.
In Acts chapter 17, he first uses the phrase the marketplace. And and that whole journey that he was on, take apart the theology, but just as like a business operator for a moment. And the journey he was on was he wanted to fund his own way in his work. And he made tents with Aquila and Priscilla, these two people who were Italian leather makers. And that whole journey he was on was so that he could say, I can raise money for the poor and for the missions work, and no one can accuse me that I'm taking any, even a dollar from it, because I fund my own way. And that is just so not popular right now. But Cinnamon and I feel like that is the model that we follow. We consider ourselves tent makers, and that's just not, that is so far out of vogue. You have to explain it to people before you can even have them have an opinion about it. But their opinion is, yeah, that doesn't sound fun at all. It's like, I'd rather work for a charity full time and get paid by the charity, or I'd rather be in business and just do business and then kind of give on the side. So, but that whole train of thinking, that's not new, and it's certainly not. It is. There's a lot of logic there. There's a
Hmm.
lot of there's a lot of wisdom in that approach, where you can say, "Hey, our charity, our overhead rate, like this is for real. For our overhead rate last year was 4%.
Hmm.
The year before, it was 2.9%. It was 4% because we had to write a check to set up a legal entity in Zambia. But, and so it was up, compared to the prior year. But the biggest expense in most charities is staffing.
Yeah.
And then the second biggest expense is marketing. Well,
Hmm.
if you know how to take both of those out of a charity, you will have an insanely efficient charity. And so, these things they're not new ideas, but they're sort of forgotten, and they're worth exploring, I think, in my way of thinking, especially for people who are motivated by, if the Apostle Paul is somebody who you look up to, that, if that resonates with you, then go study his work,
Hmm.
and really think through what he wrote and said about all this stuff. And I think it will be instructive. So,
Absolutely. I vaguely remember my teachings around Paul, but that was
yeah,
educational for me, certainly the tent making
yeah,
story. Very interesting. And I'm sure that in the interest of balance, I would say that other religions, I mean, I have some Muslim
sure, yeah,
friends. There are many, many Muslims in London that are practicing Muslims,
yeah,
have, as I understand it in my very dim way,
hmm,
similar kind of figures. And I like most of the major charities of the world, I'm sorry, the major religions of the world, I would say, seem to have a lot of injunctions around
hmm, giving,
kindness and
hmm,
giving and that sort of thing.
right,
So yeah, I don't think it's a uniquely Christian, but as you say,
yeah,
it doesn't jive very well with a lot of the messages that we've absorbed in American culture. They say when America sneezes, Britain catches a cold. So it's very, very
yeah,
similar. The
yeah,
divisiveness in Britain, well, yeah, as you said, the 80s and 90s probably were better. I'm just about old enough to have been born into the 3-day week when there were massive strikes, and we're back on strikes
mm,
again. We had rail
yeah,
and tube or underground trains or subway strikes over the last week. It's been almost impossible to move in London. So,
wow, yeah,
yes, in a divided world, we could do with more thinking about helping other people for sure. So I guess we've got to wrap this one up. But interesting discussion, man. Thank you so much for sharing, something that I know is really close to your heart, and it's really
yeah,
refreshing to have a message on a commercial channel about e-commerce that is not purely about just making a buck, but the reason why you bother making a buck in the first place, I guess, right?
yeah,
What all matters. So coming back to the more conventional wrap up, I guess we better do the usual thing, which is to say, first of all, thank you so much if you've been listening. Hope you found this a different episode. I've certainly found it very educational, and proof that you doesn't have to be either or, but both. And Jason and Cinema, living proof of that, I think. And if you've enjoyed today, don't forget, of course, to subscribe to the show on Spotify. Join the ever-growing set of people who've joined us there, and Apple Podcasts. If you're on Apple or Spotify, do give us a rating out of 5 stars. And final thing is, go and be inspired. Go and listen to this again if you've been inspired, and go take some action and follow in Jason and Cinema's footsteps.
thanks, man. One final commentary on my side. You can go see what we do on our charitable site at sopowerful.org, or the3estersfarm.org. So our feeding and food related programming work is 3 Esters Farm, and our sewing related work is So Powerful, SEW, powerful. And feel free to check those out. So
Excellent.
awesome. Thanks, man. This was a fun one. This is sort of
Yeah,
different. It's good
it
times.
was.
I was integrating my life in different ways.
Yeah, definitely. Been good.
All right. Bye, everybody.